Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Effectively Negotiate Your Salary, Total Reward Package, or Career Advancement with career coach and UCLA alumna, Susan Chang. My name is Joseph Blancas, and I serve as an Associate Director for Alumni Career Engagement at the UCLA Alumni Association. In today's program, we will discuss effective negotiation tips and strategies and how to ask for what you want in your career. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our Alumni Association sustaining donors. It's with your help that we are able to strengthen the Bruin community with career programs like this. For some general webinar housekeeping, we will have time at the end of our program for a Q&A with our speaker. So please use the Q&A function below to submit your questions and not the chat. We will also be recording today's event and will send it out when the recording is made available. Now, to start our program, I'm excited to introduce Susan Chang. Susan is a seasoned career counselor and talent management professional who has a passion for helping individuals, teams, and organizations leverage their strengths to do more of what they naturally do best. As an adjunct faculty and career coach with an extensive background in human resources and counseling, she has coached college students and professionals at all levels of their careers, from entry-level to executive roles. She has a passion for helping individuals identify careers and workplaces that tap into their strengths, values, skills, and interests. As a human capital leader, she has developed and executed on human resource strategies for companies ranging from startups to Fortune 500 and spanning across various industries, including healthcare, hospitality, retail, technology, and manufacturing. Susan, if you'd like to come onto the screen, thank you for being here with us today. I'll turn the program over to you.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here to talk about this topic. As a career coach and as a talent professional, I get asked about this topic quite often, so excited to discuss it with you today. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen here. But while I'm doing that, we're going to take a quick poll just to get a sense of who's in your audience and what your current situation is. So Sarah, if you could help me with that, that'd be great. So if you're seeing this poll, just go ahead and choose what best applies to you. Are you currently in a role and looking to make a change within the next 6 months, or not looking to make a change, sorry? Or are you looking to move into a new position within your current organization? Or are you looking for a new opportunity altogether? So go ahead and just take a moment, and then Sarah, let us know when the responses come in. Great. So we have pretty good mix. So a little bit more looking for a new opportunity altogether. We have a fair amount, about close to a third, that's looking to stay within their organization, but would like a new position. And about a quarter of you that are looking to, you're pretty engaged in your current role and not looking to make a change anytime soon. Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. Thanks for sharing that information. All right. So here's a look at our agenda for today and what we're going to be covering. So we're going to talk a little bit about your worth and how to kind of make sure that you know what to value and what to present in that case, and how to get prepared to really have a solid conversation around negotiating. Timing is really important. So we're going to talk about how that applies in different situations. And how do you have a sense for what the company is able to give you as well, and what policies they may have in place. And then we're going to talk about how to make sure you practice your pitch and how to focus on your value and not just on your personal needs there. So let's jump right in. So why do we want to negotiate in the first place, right? So first, get grounded in terms of the importance of why you want to negotiate and your reasons for negotiating. So just a statistic, depending on which survey you look at, right around half of people typically negotiate a job offer, okay? And the good news is that for those people that do negotiate, almost the majority of it, right about 90%, do get something in return, right? And if they're not able to get a monetary return, a lot of times they are also able to get something else in their total rewards package to basically get a better offer than they were originally offered. So it is really important to know that negotiating is something that's expected of you, and that as long as you do it well, it's something that can definitely reap some rewards for you. So let's talk about how to gain some confidence around that and what skills may help you with that negotiation here. So first of all, know your worth. What things should you keep in mind when you think about the market value? So what is your target range, right? Think about what's the range for the position that you're interested in. Think about the industry and anything that might be relevant in knowing the range. And then also know like what your financial situation is and what's your walkaway point, right? What's the minimum that you're able to take for that role, and what's the minimum within the range of the role as well. Okay, so some things to keep in mind to help you with that information. Do your company research. Look at postings. Nowadays, especially in certain states like California, you're going to see ranges being posted. So it's going to help you know what that position will actually pay. Sometimes the ranges are going to be really wide, so it's still really helpful to know what within that range is realistic for you based on your experience and based on the level of experience for that position, okay? And then trade journals and professional associations usually have really great information that are more applicable to the type of industry that you're looking to get into. So if you're not part of your associations, look to get involved, use the salary surveys they have access to. That will also give you really great information. We're going to talk about salary websites and calculators that you can use as well. And then last but not least, really reach out to your network of people that are already within those organizations that you want to work with, right? Talk to friends, other alumni, talk to mentors, talk to recruiters. A lot of times recruiters will tell you if you ask them appropriately and during the right time, okay? And then informational interviews. Those are a great way to reach out to people in your network or people that you know, that or even just go through your alumni network or go through LinkedIn and find somebody in the industry that might be willing to talk to you and just give you a sense of what that marketplace looks like within their company. So let's dive into researching the industry and market. There's lots of information out there on salary, and you want to kind of really make sure that you do your homework well so you can speak to it. Some different websites out there, some of the more recognized ones are Glassdoor, where you have more specific information from people that work there or have worked there. PayScale, LinkedIn, and Indeed all have pretty good calculators in there that you can use to look up specific information. I would definitely compare, because for certain industries, some are better than others. So definitely take a look at all of those main websites that are available out there. But also look at government databases. The Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes some good information on industries as well. Professional associations, as I mentioned, is a good source of referral as well. There's different job boards out there too that are going to give you good information, especially as I mentioned in certain states. You have more visibility on that now than you ever have. And then networking, right? Really ask people in your network to kind of get a sense of if a company is paying kind of, higher in there for their market, or are they more kind of on par with their market, or are they an organization that maybe pays more on the minimum range? Okay, so you get a better sense of where they're at within the range for that position. And then recruitment agencies. A lot of times if you're working with staffing agencies, they will let you know what the salary is as well. They'll also help you with the negotiation process. So it's important to have those discussions up front. And then do your company research as well. The company may post some information on where they're at in terms of different positions. So you want to make sure you do some research around that. Look at online communities. A lot of people post information on that too, not just on Glassdoor, but other sites as well. And then for new graduates, the National Association of Colleges and Employers actually has some good salary surveys on an annual basis that talk about entry-level positions and where they're at. So as you get started, before you kind of dive into researching, think about your priorities. What's really important to you in your next role? Sometimes people get hung up on just salary, but they're not really thinking about the overall package. And we've seen kind of a bit of buyer's remorse, especially with the pandemic, where people have kind of left positions for higher pay, but then went back and decided that they weren't that happy or went back to previous positions. So, and a lot of it has to do with not reflecting on what's really important to you or not really understanding what's coming with the package that you're getting as well. So think about what your values are. What are your priorities? Is it more important for you to have flexibility in the workplace, to be able to set your own hours to a certain extent, work from home or work in a hybrid workplace? Is it more important for you to be doing certain tasks, that you actually enjoy, or to be working with people or a leader that you really feel connected to? Okay. So think about what's important to you. What about the benefits and career growth? Where does that weigh in terms of your decision on what you're looking to get out of your next role? So consider all these factors when you think about the overall package. Now, how do you prepare your case here? So there's a lot of things to consider here. So first, think about what you've done and what you've accomplished, and try to quantify that whenever possible. And hopefully you're already doing that in your resume, but take stock of what you've done and how relevant it is to the position that you're talking to about, right? So think about projects you've done, initiatives, what responsibilities have you taken on, what level of responsibility, and then think about how that will showcase your value. And then do you have good testimonials that you've gathered, right? Recommendations on LinkedIn, but also customers and clients, different coworkers and managers that can speak to the value that you've contributed to their organization. Okay. Do you have past performance reviews if you're talking about promotions that you can kind of go back and showcase that what you've done over the last couple of years that you've been within an organization? Do you have specific examples of your work product that speak to what you're capable of doing? So think of how you want to highlight experience, training, and important certifications that might be relevant as well. Timing is really key. Think about when is a good time to bring up the conversation, because you want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on with the organization. Is there a budget for what you're asking for? Is there a better time to be asking for this, right? So you want to think about after you've completed a significant project or achieved a milestone, it might be a good time to bring up that discussion. Also during performance reviews, or actually right before a performance review, are you already laying that foundation for that conversation? So let's talk a little bit more in terms of the talking points around talking about your salary. So if a range is not posted, always feel free to ask the recruiter for the range during that initial interview. The recruiter doesn't want to waste your time and they don't want to waste their time. So most of the time they will actually give you a range and let you know what it is, right? So it's okay to say, hey, do you have a range in mind for this position? And let them know that you would consider the total compensation package when you're evaluating what's important to you and whether a salary meets your needs or not. Okay, and then once you have the salary range, try not to get too fixated on a specific number or get kind of cornered into a specific number too early on. It's okay to give a salary range if you get pushed on a range, but try not to really just, focus on one number specifically, okay? Wait until you have a verbal job offer before you get more specific on salary. And if you kind of get asked about a specific salary, you can always say, hey, I prefer to evaluate salary in the context of the total compensation. So do you have a salary in mind, right? And see where their starting point is as well. And then for those of you that are looking for internal changes, look at the data internally that's already available as well. Does your organization do compensation steps? Do they have some sort of published information out there as well? Or is there information that your manager or HR can share with you? So think of what's available and what you have access to. And then also think about what other things that you want to be aware of in terms of what's the performance currently for your company? Is it likely to change in the near future? So you can kind of think of what's the best time to have those types of conversations. Next, think about understanding the company's policies and what they might be dealing with. So research any types of formal policies that a company might have on how they manage compensation, and also with promotions. Do they have specific requirements before you're eligible for a promotion? Is there specific programs that they put people through and things like that? Is there so definitely really educate yourself on that. Ask your manager, have conversations with HR, and just understand what their compensation practices are. Okay, know the decision-making process and hierarchy too. How are promotions and salary increases approved? Get a sense for how that works within that organization. And then be aware of any salary bands or ranges for your position. Companies have, especially larger companies, are going to have a little bit more set salary bands and ranges. And they'll also have kind of some internal mechanisms in place to make sure that people that have been there a certain amount of time or that have a certain amount of experience, that they're not, and there's no salary compression with new people that are starting as well, so that they're trying to always look at equity throughout the organization as well. So understand a little bit about how that works so you have a better sense of how to approach that conversation. So next, practicing your pitch. How do you really make sure you have a good conversation around that? And definitely practicing and feeling comfortable with what you're saying beforehand will make this conversation go a lot smoother. So you want to rehearse the conversation with people you feel comfortable with, or people that are knowledgeable about that, right? So just kind of practice what your talking points are. Make sure that it's comfortable for you to say, put it into your own words. Anticipate any kind of counter arguments that might come up or questions that might come up about what you're asking for, so you don't get caught off guard as well. And then try to be concise so that you can kind of really think about what are the key points that you want to make and be able to deliver it in a confident way. For those of you that are looking for promotions or internal movement, think about what accomplishments you can kind of highlight that you've done within the organization. What have your contributions been? How can you quantify those? How have you added value to the organization in some way, whether it's reducing cost, whether it's helping grow the organization in some way? Think about what your contributions amount to. Remember to be positive and professional throughout your negotiation process, right? It's really about the tone makes a big difference in terms of how successful you'll be. So even if your goals might be aggressive, you want to make sure that your behavior doesn't come across that way, right? Even if you're not hearing things that you want to hear, you want to make sure that you really pay attention to your tone and stay positive throughout. And you want to think about putting it into a problem-solving mode. Can you make it a win-win situation where the organization is seeing the value of giving you that promotion or giving you that salary increase? And think about how you can demonstrate confidence throughout the conversation. Next is be persuasive, right? Why should you get that salary increase or that promotion in the first place? So doing your research shows that you really understand and know what you're talking about. And then focus on facts and objective criteria. Try not to focus on just your personal needs, but on what concretely is there in terms of what you've accomplished and the value that you've contributed. Develop a compelling rationale in terms of why you should get that raise and what that promotion should look like, and based on kind of your increased level of responsibilities, for example, or what you've accomplished and contributed to the organization. And then be prepared to be flexible and think about also alternatives, right? If what you're proposing isn't doable, what other things might you want to propose out there? So definitely focus on your value and not what your personal situation is. Base it on your contributions and what the market value is for your role. And don't really get personal with what your financial situation is, because that's really not going to help you in these negotiations. But think about how you've contributed to the organization and their success if you're already internal. And then don't make assumptions or over negotiate. A lot of times you wonder what's the sweet spot in terms of negotiating and over negotiating. I typically recommend, don't go back more than 2 or 3 times in a negotiation, and don't get, really read the person that you're negotiating with, right? Make sure you're kind of in tune with the body language and what they're telling you as well, so you're aware of kind of when you're where to push and where not to push, right? Be sensitive to that. And then make sure that you're always negotiating verbally on, so that you can see the person or at least hear their tone of voice and be able to sense how that negotiation is. Don't do it over email. It's really difficult to negotiate that way. So some talking points of having that successful negotiation. First, really make sure that when you do get an offer, that you start by being thankful and being positive about the offer in the first place. And then if you don't have all the information, make sure you ask for additional information so you can really make sure that you have the total picture of what the total rewards look like. Do you know what all the benefits are and what all the costs associated with your benefits are, right? Do you know what the time off looks like? Do you know what the training and reimbursements for tuition look like? So make sure that you have a complete package and that you understand what you're evaluating first. And then never accept the offer on the spot. Always take the time to review and consider the offer. The recruiters expect you to ask for that, so they will not be put off by that. But just make sure you do that, because that also helps you prepare and understand your talking points before you have that conversation. And then make it collaborative when you talk to the recruiter or the hiring manager. How can you make the situation be a win-win situation for everyone involved? So consider what the organization it has to gain from hiring you as well, in terms of how you pitch that. Talk about any salary research that you have and be prepared to provide some evidence to basically, be able to substantiate your ask, as well as to how you came up with a specific number. And then be respectful, but with making your case, right? Show understanding for their points. Make sure that you're actively listening to what they're saying to you as well. And be sure that you get everything in writing before you kind of formally accept an offer as well. Last but not least, be open to compromise. There's a lot of times if you show that if they're really, if you've kind of gone as far as you can on salary, think about other things that you might be able to negotiate out as well, right? What else might be negotiable? So there's a lot of things that could potentially be negotiable. So this is kind of also finding out what's important to you to negotiate. Is there potential for a sign-on bonus or relocation package if you're moving? Is there stock options or bonuses available? Is there some way for you to negotiate when you get your next performance evaluation? Instead of a year, would they be willing to evaluate your pay at 6 months or 90 days? What benefits are negotiable, right? Could they negotiate your health benefits in some way in terms of cost analysis and things like that, right? Time off, a lot of times that's negotiable as well. Schedule work hours, definitely something you might be worthwhile. The job title might be important to you. Different wellness perks that, such as gym memberships and so forth, that you may get additional perks for. And then professional development funds, if you're going to continue your education or if you're looking to get ongoing training and development, think about how that might be beneficial to you as well. Think if you're working from home, what kind of setup might you need? All of those types of things, and then additional time off or childcare assistance as well may be really helpful for you as well. In active listening, really make sure that you're paying attention to the feedback, if you're in person, the nonverbal. If you're on the phone, think about the tone of voice. And sometimes the recruiter or the hiring manager will actually give you some cues as to where they're at. They might say things like, hey, this is the range that we're looking at, or this is kind of the final range that we're looking at. And so just kind of cue in on keywords and how they're saying it too, to see where is there room to negotiate. And then adapt your negotiation points based on the conversation. Make sure you're respectful throughout the negotiation as well, and you kind of really taking the time to understand the employer's perspective as well. And then if you are turned down, make sure you handle that also professionally and gracefully. So remain professional regardless, even if you're not getting what you want to still walk away if you decide to walk away gracefully. And then you want to also ask for feedback, right? In terms of, especially if you're talking about internal promotions, you want to think about, is there room for improvement and things that they're looking for you to contribute before they consider a promotion. And then express your interest in continual growth within the company and agree on any type of future discussions and check-ins as well to keep that conversation going. So in conclusion, know your worth. Make sure that you have a good list of your skills, accomplishments, and market value. Quantify all of those things whenever possible so that you have specific information you can provide. Really prepare thoroughly and have a clear sense of your goals. What are your priorities? What's really important to you? And then really have compelling evidence that you can share there. And be positive and persuasive throughout, and make sure that you kind of convey in a positive tone. And you want to navigate the process, the timing and the context, be aware of what's going on with the organization as well. Handle any challenges gracefully and professionally, and close with confidence. Make sure that you kind of, if you decide to negotiate, make sure that you try to look at different options that are mutually beneficial, and that you're clear on what the next steps look like as well. And then remember, negotiations provides the room for continuous growth. So it's about building confidence and then thinking about how you can continue to apply those skills to your career. So the more you practice, the more you have the opportunity to have those conversations, the more fluid they'll become, and the more confident you'll feel in the discussion. So don't think of it as a kind of an all or nothing or one-time kind of thing. It's something that you can definitely continue to build on and develop on and draw on from throughout your career as well. So definitely keep that in mind in terms of how you want to continue to keep those negotiations going to help you advance in your career. All right, so if you would like to, I know negotiations are definitely based on your personal situation and what's going on there. So if you would like to sign up for a free consult, I'm more than happy to discuss more specifics on your personal situation as well. But I'll go ahead and kind of bring on Joseph to help us with the Q&A at this point.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. This is such helpful information. Great tips, great strategies. I know that I didn't negotiate until probably my third position. So I want to transition into the Q&A portion of today's session. And so while we do that, we're going to throw a link into the chat for those of you who are sticking around to provide or fill out our post-program feedback survey while we get through some of these questions that we've received both in registration beforehand, and then some of the ones that have been submitted already. So if you have any questions for Susan, please feel free to submit them if you haven't done so already. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started with some that we received in registration. And I mean, the first question I think I should ask is, should you always negotiate?
Yeah, I definitely think there's no downside to negotiating as long as you do it professionally and respectfully. People will respect you for asking. So I don't really see a downside to doing it.
And I guess the second question to that, is it ever not appropriate?
No, I think usually they'll tell you if there's no room for negotiation, because a lot of times they want to kind of save you from having those conversations. So
Mm-hmm.
they may I've had situations where the recruiter is honest and upfront and will say, hey, this is kind of the top number we can offer, so just want to let you know that upfront. And you can kind of dig around and get a better sense of like, hey, is there anything else that we can negotiate on? Or is there maybe just even a little room there, right? You can
Yeah,
get a sense for that still.
great. Another question that we received, and I feel could be applicable to many of the participants on the call, is how would you recommend negotiating for a full-time position, benefits, and a raise from a temporary position?
Yeah, I think first of all is understanding like the organization situation, right? Is there room for a permanent role? Is that something that they are open to in the first place based on their budget and based on their needs? And then second of all is have you contributed certain significant things that you could bring up to kind of showcase why your role should be, or is there a demand for the role to be full-time based on the responsibilities that you've have on your plate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I wrote it down. I thought it was great when you said understanding company policy around salary negotiations, because most of the time that's available and accessible to you. It's just a matter of, locating that or asking the right person to say, hey, can I get more information around this, so that again, you understand what might be the limitations. And kind of going off that, we have a question from one of the attendees today, and their question was, what do you do in scenarios where you might work for maybe a nonprofit or like a government agency where there's this atmosphere of the budget being tight and it's not being a good time? How would you suggest someone go about that when it comes to negotiating salary?
Yeah, I think it's you kind of definitely want to understand the organization situation and how they generate profit, right? And what types of different funding sources they might have. So you can kind of see where that might be flexibility. And timing wise, you want to kind of see if the landscape might be changing soon, where there might be some funding coming in, whether it's grant funding and other types of funding. So you want to try to probe around or look for information that's available on site as well. And hopefully you also have some leaders in the organization that may be a little bit more open about sharing some information with you as well.
Great, thank you. Another one of our attendees asked a question around asking for a salary adjustment um, after they graduate from a master's program. So this might be a very common scenario for someone who might be in a department or a role for a lengthy period of time, and they obtain a master's or some sort of degree that might be helpful in the particular role that they're in. How do they go about doing that effectively and asking for a salary increase?
So did they get the master's while they were in the role, or are they coming into a new role with a master's, I guess? Is there a
Yeah, so they are in the role and they are graduating in this master's program coming up. how do they go about asking for a salary increase?
Yeah, I would go back to the value, right? What value are you going to be able to contribute now that you have a master's, right? What does the master's contribute in terms of your ability to do the job more effectively? Or is it a different role that you're looking to gain? So really go back to the value that that master has helped you, because again, you want to make it win-win for the organization. It's not about just about you obtaining that degree, but how is that degree going to help the organization?
Great, thank you. Hopefully that helped the person who asked that question. Another one that we received is, would you recommend using an offer letter from another company to negotiate for higher pay with your current company?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It kind of
Mm.
depends on the situation, right? Hopefully you've already had some conversation about it, that you're not just starting with an offer letter, but you've had some initial conversation to see how open they are to the usually the offer letter, when I've seen, it's more of like a last resort, that you have to be ready to also walk away and take that other offer. I wouldn't bring out an offer letter unless you're actually serious about it, and having, because they could call you up on it and be like, hey, well, sorry, we can't match that. So you want to be prepared for how that discussion is going to go. And I would also try to make sure that you have had some initial discussion first, so you don't kind of present this offer letter and they see it as more of a threat than really to help you. But it can be helpful as part of the discussion.
Mhm. Great, thank you for that answer. Another one that we received is around approaching if you're already highly compensated for the overall market, but lower internally within your company. Have you experienced situations like that with any of your clients, or any tips on kind of navigating that?
I would definitely try to first of all make sure that you validate that that's actually the case, because sometimes people don't really know the dynamics of other people's situations, right? And they may kind of think that they're underpaid, but it's helpful to understand more fully, in terms of why somebody might be getting paid more than them, because there's a lot of different factors involved. It could be time and position, it could be a certain expertise, there could be different or it could be that the company's not doing a good job of really looking at compensation across the board, right? Because some organizations do that more routinely than others. So I would try to kind of get a better sense of what's going on there if you can first, and then also really have open conversations. Hopefully you have a good relationship with your manager, that you can start having some conversations about your value and kind of how compensation is looked at, so you can open up that discussion.
Great, thank you for that. Another question that we received in our registration was, how often should you be negotiating your salary after you have earned a position?
Yeah, you definitely want to wait until you've definitely contributed something significant, right? So I wouldn't be, well, I've been here 30 days and let's negotiate salary. So you definitely have to be there long enough to actually have shown a contribution. So typically that's going to be 6 months or more, because it takes a little time to really kind of understand the role. So you want to make sure that you have something to highlight to demonstrate why you should even be considered for a salary increase. And also, if that was part of your negotiation of saying like, hey, can we review my performance in 6 months instead of in a year, that if that was something you both agreed to, then it's easier to have that conversation at a certain point as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have a lot of questions, and so I'm gonna try to get through as much of them as we can, given that we have the time. An attendee today asked, I'm entering into the academia job market. I noticed many of my colleagues do not negotiate strongly. How do you deal with an industry that lowballs certain candidates?
Yeah, so I guess it's important to know are we talking about a faculty position or a staff position? Because there's definitely different ways that pay is done in the academic world, whether it's
Mhm.
staff pay and faculty pay. And adjunct versus, there's lots of dynamics there. But there's definitely information you can get in terms of researching the market. And like, for example, some like public organizations, for example, have to publish their ranges and their pay bands. So you get a little bit more transparency than you will from private agencies, for example. So, but you can definitely feel around for that. You can also definitely think about doing some of those informational interviews so you can get a better sense of that. NACE, the National Association of Employers and Colleges, also publishes some information. So there is some data out there available to you. So I would definitely look at talking to people as well as getting some of the available data to get a sense first.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned, doing your research, especially maybe internal for candidates who are trying to ask for salary increases internally or promotions. So this person asked if negotiating for an internal increase or promotion at one of the big companies that has job levels with pay bands, if you aren't able to get the information from your manager or HR about the different job levels, how do you go about that? Or any tips on navigating that?
Yeah, I would, if you can't get specific ranges and the pay bands, I would kind of try to get general feedback as well in terms of like how are those decisions made, what things are taken into consideration, what factors do they look at. So is there kind of the overall range instead of without breaking it down in band that you can get access to as well. It's also really helpful in large organizations to have, besides your manager, if you're not really getting through to your manager, you don't necessarily want to go over your manager's head. You always want to have those conversations. But in addition to your manager, do you have a mentor? Do you have a sponsor in the organization that's actually actively promoting you and also can give you a little bit more candid feedback as well? If not, those are good things to really seek out too within the organization.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned having, these salary negotiations, preferably over the phone, or if it's on Zoom or in person. But most of the time, you're getting a call when you get an offer, right? And so if someone did do their research on salary, on the salary market for that position, would presenting that to them be best done just verbally and saying, hey, I've researched for this position. I was hoping to be somewhere around here. And just mentioning that in general is how would one go about that? Like, what does that look like? This person was asking, do I email them beforehand? Do I show them, a paper outlining the different statistics? What do you typically suggest to your clients?
Yeah, I definitely would have have more of an open conversation first, because again, then you get kind of gauge at how they're reacting to it. And if there's things that they're bringing up that you want to make sure that you address, you can kind of address it right there and then. I wouldn't pre-show kind of salary ranges and salary data that I've gotten online before having just more of an open conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Another question we have here. What's a good way to approach a conversation with my manager about seeing if I can get a raise internally, but considering seeking employment elsewhere if not? I think that's a good question. Many people, I think about that, right? Is if I can't stay here because of my pay, how can I be frank with an employer about potentially leaving?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to your relationship with your manager. I think on this one, first and foremost, hopefully you have an established relationship that's pretty open and supportive, where you're able to have some open development conversations with your manager. And if that's the case, then I would say, just definitely talk about, hey, I'd love to continue to grow within this organization, but I'm also needing to know like kind of where I stand and what that looks like. So having more of those open discussions is helpful to kind of frame that conversation. And hopefully I would definitely build that relationship with your manager first, where it's not a one time and done at a performance evaluation, that it's more of an ongoing conversation, that you have that open conversation, and that your manager hopefully is supportive of your development overall, whether or not it's within the organization.
Another question we have from an attendee, I know I've been seeing a lot more of it, is like salary transparency, right? People posting videos of what they make and whatnot. And so this question from the attendee is, how do you recommend approaching coworkers to know if you're getting underpaid or not?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think it's really, if you have an established conversation with people that you trust, right? And I know some organizations really shun away from wanting you to have those conversations, but they really honestly can't control it. But you also want to be kind of respectful to asking people that you don't have a relationship with, because people don't always deal well with being asked about their pay unless you've established a relationship with them. So, but if you're doing an informational interview with someone in a specific department or position that you're interested in, you can kind of frame that, hey, what can you give me an idea of what that range might look like for this position, and what would be fair for somebody in my position? So you can kind of more openly talk about the conversation rather than just say, hey, how much are you getting paid, right? So and not quite just going right there to that question.
Great, thank you. I think wasn't sure how you were going to answer that, because it's not everyone is as open, right? So
yeah.
But that was great. Let's see. Some pretty lengthy questions here. I work in the nonprofit space and am interviewing for private companies that generally have a lot higher salary ranges. What are your recommendations for negotiating when your current salary is much lower than the new job's salary range?
Yeah, well, the good news is that you don't have to tell them how much you're making right now.
Yeah.
That's the good news. So I would think about the market value and where you fall based on your experience within that market value, and talk about it in that respect. You don't have to talk about it in terms of how much you make.
Great. Another question here, understanding that promotion timeframes vary across industries, roles, and people, is there a specific time frame with good performance, steady growth, where you would definitely expect to be promoted? How do you know when it's time to walk away from a role?
Yeah, I think you definitely want to weigh in different factors on this one. And there's no hard and fast rule saying that everyone gets promoted at this particular junction. Most companies aren't going to be that clear on defining their steps. So I would definitely think about having that active conversation if you do have that relationship with your manager, of like in terms of your growth, how you're doing in your current role first and foremost. What room is there to continue to grow your role and grow yourself professionally within that organization? Have that be more of an organic conversation that you're having as part of your regular meetings with your manager. But in terms of when is it a good time to walk away, always know kind of what the market is looking like, right? So even when I'm not actively looking, I like to have a post on what my industry is doing and what other organizations are doing. So you can definitely do your research out there, see what kinds of jobs are coming up, talk to your colleagues that are in the role, do some informational interviews as well to get a better sense of what's going on, so you can really approach that conversation really understanding what your industry is currently doing.
Great. This is probably gonna be our last question for today's session. And the question is, given the foundation of a negotiation is showing your value to the company, what are the ways you can do so without sounding confrontational in the negotiation?
Yeah. So if you're In terms of showing your value to the company, are we talking about somebody internally, or are we talking about like a salary negotiation for a new company?
Yeah, I think it would be internally.
Okay. I think if you're doing it in a positive way where you're demonstrating, kind of your successes and sharing it with your manager, hey, just want to give you an update on this project and some of the highlights of the project. And if you're showcasing in that way in terms of the value and just communicating that, I don't think that's ever going to come off as confrontational. So it's really about your tone and how you approach those conversations. That's important. And you also want to kind of read the room, right? Understand at what point have you kind of demonstrated significant value that you can kind of start approaching those conversations as well. You don't want to do it excessively where every conversation you have obviously becomes about like, okay, so can I get a raise? But you want to lay the foundation and make sure you're talking about your contributions enough, and then build up to having a conversation about salary.
Yeah, I I would say that negotiating is an art and it takes practice. Um, I've learned, and I think it's helpful to maybe practice having a conversation with a friend or a partner or loved one, so that you can go into that conversation feeling confident and prepared, just like an interview, right? Whether it's internally and with someone who you meet with on a weekly basis because they're your supervisor, or if it's a new role that you're potentially looking to step into. So I definitely think that it won't come off confrontational as long as you practice that tone with someone. Well, that's all the questions that we're going to be able to get to today. Susan, is there anything, last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with those tuning in today?
Yeah, just I think there's definitely been a lot of things shared, but definitely just really be comfortable with the conversation, right? So do your research, practice that conversation, and then just really feel free to reach out if there's something that I can help you with, right? I sometimes it's just helpful to kind of talk about your personal situation with someone as well. So there's lots of opportunities to do that as well. But the important thing is just make it conversational and feel confident with what you want to get out of it as well. So
Great. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here with us today. For those of you who are tuning in, I highly recommend that you take advantage of a free consult with Susan. And before we conclude, I also want to encourage you to explore our Bruin Promise website, where you can find other ways to engage with the UCLA community. There are tools and resources that you can participate in and take advantage of as you navigate your career, and throughout essentially your lifetime with UCLA. And then if you haven't completed our post-program feedback survey, you will be prompted to do so once we end the webinar, and you'll also get it in a follow-up email along with the link to connect with Susan if you're interested in doing so. But with that, again, Susan, thank you for your time today and for being here with us. And hope everyone has a good rest of their day, and go Bruins.
thank you.